So when I was barely 20 years old, I was traveling with a small group of people through China, and we were spending about 2 months in Qinghai province, which used to be part of the Tibet. Our destinations was a specific town to teach English, but we'd been stopping often in small towns and small cities along the way. One day we arrived in a rural town, very small, nothing unusual. We spent only a couple of days there, shopping for food at the markets and walking around to see the sights, although there weren't many. This was in the dead of winter, in February, and all the grass on the hills and plains around the town was dead and brown. The overall feeling was that of the normal kind of bleakness that any rural place had in the winter. At this time in my life, things were going amazingly, extraordinarily well for me. And I say that because my teenagehood had been rather darkly overcast. But the overwhelming good luck of being able to travel and these close friends I'd made in the last year had more than changed my feelings and attitude towards life. It was like I was a whole new person. I was ecstatic to be in Tibet. Went to sleep with a smile on my face every night. On our second day staying in this small town, I woke up feeling a little odd. Not bad, just odd, like my normal thoughts and feelings had been turned down low, like on a dial. We all decided to go for a walk on the hills right behind the town, where there was a small summit with a pile of rocks and some prayer flags. As we hiked up the hill behind the town, I started feeling stranger and stranger. I wasn't scared, and I didn't feel angry or any strong emotion. In fact, it was like emotion was trickling out of me somehow, and I was getting blanker and blanker, emptier and emptier. My mind started feeling a little hazy, and more I felt like I simply didn't care about anything. A small and rapidly dwindling part of myself started to panic, and I knew something bad was happening, but it was like my own inner voice was slowly getting quieter and quieter. I remember we reached the little summit, and I simply sank to the ground next to the pile of rocks. Without meaning to, I started tuning out the voices around me and fixed all my attention on the little pebbles in the dirt. I began tapping one against the other repeatedly. Do you know the kind of horror that is opposite of feeling scared or feeling anything at all? The kind of hideousness of a fly buzzing against a closed window for hours on end in an empty room? That's what was filling my mind. It was demonic in its meaninglessness. I touched my face and felt that I was grinning at nothing. Through all the emptiness, a thought floated in the forefront of my mind. You should just die. At first it sounded totally reasonable, but something in me fought it and I was momentarily troubled. Right then my group started to walk down the hill and I followed. The further we walked, the more normal I felt until we left the town that afternoon, and I was totally freaked out. When another girl, Hannah, mentioned it in an odd, offhand way that she had felt very strange and depressed while staying there, I told her I'd felt the same. When the group leader mentioned that a local had told him that the town had been plagued with a rash of young women under 25 committing suicide, Hannah and I went white. This didn't happen to me, but it happened to my aunt, and it's so freaky that I'll never forget it. My aunt and uncle bought a cool old Victorian in a small town about 40 miles away from Austin. It was a really pretty, awesome old place, and it had a historical marker in the front lawn and everything. My aunt and uncle moved for job reasons years ago, and the house is now a successful bed and breakfast. Why anyone would pay money to sleep there is beyond me, though. When my aunt and uncle were still living in the house, their daughter and her young son also lived with them. Chad, the son, was about 7 at the time. One day my aunt was home alone. Uncle and her daughter were both at work. Chad was at school, and the lady who cleaned the house had already come and gone for the day. My aunt was in the study working on a project or something. In this house, if you sat at the desk in the study, you had a clear view of the foot of the stairs. She was sitting there on the computer when she looked up and saw a young boy sitting at the foot of the stairs, staring at her. He was about the same age as Chad, and she assumed he was a friend from school. She asked the kid his name, and he didn't answer. She thought he was weird, so she told him he needed to be in school or to go home. She looked down for a second, and when she looked up, he was gone. When Chad got home from school that day, she told him one of his friends had been in the house. He said, "No way, all my friends were at school with me." She described the boy, and Chad got real quiet. He said, "Oh yeah, I know him. He comes out of my closet to play sometimes at night." Unnerved, my aunt and cousin told him to go play outside and stop telling wild stories. A couple of months later, my aunt was doing some research on the history of the house and found out that a young boy, aged 8, had died there from leukemia in the late 70s. She found an old newspaper article about his death with a picture she recognized. He was the same boy who had been staring at her on the stairs that day. I lived in a house from hell for almost 4 years. From age 11 to almost 16, there was constantly something happening. Doors flying open and shut, voices, footsteps. Nothing ever stayed where you put it. I was alone there a lot because both my parents worked, and I was constantly terrified. One of the most gut-level disturbing things, though, was the little girl in my bathroom. Every time I walked past my bathroom, which was constantly since it was right outside my bedroom, I saw a little girl with blonde curled hair in a rose-colored dress. She just stood there, staring, looking like a photograph from 1905. I started keeping the door closed so I can walk by without seeing her, but she was always there when I opened it. Once I stepped in past her, I couldn't see her anymore, but I could feel her there. She scared me, but I felt really sorry for her because she was trapped there, just like me, but probably forever. As the years went by and things in the house continued to get worse, she started seeming darker. I started feeling like she wasn't really a little girl. I knew there was something ugly in the house, and I felt like that was presenting this sympathetic image to me. Then I started thinking I was completely losing my mind. One day when I was 14, I had a friend from out of town come and stay with me for a week. I hadn't told her anything whatsoever about the house because I didn't think she would come if I did. Right after she got there, we were sitting in my room and she left to go to the bathroom. About a minute later, she walked back in with a puzzled look on her face and said, "So there's a little girl in your bathroom?" Yeah, she hangs out in there. Blonde hair, curls, pink dress. Yeah. You know that's not really a little girl, don't you? I almost threw up. I was so relieved and terrified and excited and ready to run out of the house screaming. She wouldn't use my bathroom the rest of the week, and I started using it as little as possible, without pissing off my parents, who didn't really want to believe. Eventually we moved out, and I could not have been happier. I distanced myself from it mentally as much as I could. Then, when I was 18, I took another friend on a road trip to pack up a few things I'd left in the house. My parents hadn't managed to sell it and wouldn't for another 5 years. The minute we got on the property, my friend seemed uncomfortable. When we came around the bend in the long, steep driveway, he went completely white. I could tell something was wrong, but he insisted he was okay, so we got to work. After a while, he asked to use the bathroom, and I directed him to mine. Not 20 seconds after he left, he came running back, gasping for breath, and slammed the bedroom door behind him. He started babbling about some little blonde girl who wasn't really a little girl. And all of a sudden he went dead still, looked me in the eye, and very solemnly said, "She's not happy with you. You left and you weren't supposed to." We threw what we could grab in 2 trips in my car, and we got the fuck out of there at top speed. When I was 9 or 10, I had a Halloween birthday party, and my friends and I were playing with the Ouija board, one of those Parker Brothers games that was bought from Target. The entire time we played with it, asking questions and everything, I was subtly moving the marker to answer the questions, trying to freak my friends out. They must have assumed that I was moving it because we were just laughing and nobody took it seriously. When we were finished, we all stood up and started walking out of the room. One of us turned back to face the board and said, "Goodbye," to it, giggling like little kids do, and the marker moved completely on its own, at least 6 inches to cover the word "goodbye" on the board. We all saw it, including my mom and her fiancé, who were in the room with us. None of us even screamed. We just sat there in stunned silence. After a few seconds, my mom went over and kicked the marker with her toe, and nothing else happened. My mom and her fiancé were genuinely concerned and looked the board over. Still today, this is the only thing I've experienced that I can't imagine how to explain logically. I thought maybe my mom or her fiancé had a string, but it moved in the opposite direction from where they were standing. There was no fan on in the room, and none of us felt any sort of gust. The marker is made of plastic and can't be affected by magnets. Hell, we didn't even live in an area subject to earthquakes or any type of tectonic movements, so that had to be ruled out too. My mom considered moving out of the house, but we never did, and nothing like that ever happened again. We all still talk about it today, and we all agree that it must have been some supernatural event that we can't explain. So this was several years ago when I was a total deadbeat and living with my then girlfriend's parents. They had a tri-level house with the basement that contained our living space and my girlfriend and I's bedroom. Upstairs was the living space for everyone else, the dining room and kitchen. The 3rd level had the master bedroom and 2 additional bedrooms for my girlfriend's sisters. I was home alone one night with her parents off with friends and my girlfriend at a friend's. Her sisters were at an all-night church thing. I elected to stay home and play World of Warcraft all night. Where my computer and desk sat, right above my head, was an AC vent. Often I could hear her sisters playing in her room from that vent. I was leveling my paladin or something when I heard laughing and giggling coming from the vent. Nobody was supposed to be home, so my heart picked up. I glanced at the clock on my computer and it read 1:36 a.m. I remember this all very distinctly. I went to go investigate and headed upstairs. The way the landing sits is at the top of those stairs. You can turn left and either go upstairs or go into the kitchen. I climbed the 2nd set of stairs and opened the first door on the left, which was her young sister's room, which is directly above the basement. Inside, I used the light of my phone to illuminate as best I could. I saw a small figure, what I assumed was a small girl wrapped in a white sheet in the center of the room. Cue pants shitting. This figure, this young girl, stops playing with the dolls and slowly looks at me. It lets out the most ear-shattering scream you could imagine. My skin crawls just thinking about it, and my chest tightens up just remembering it. I wish I could tell you what transpired, but I remember walking up to the bottom of the landing, right next to the door of the kitchen. I stumbled into the kitchen to get a drink of water and contemplate what the fuck just happened. I glanced at the clock on the microwave and it read 4:46. We never found the sheet the next day, but the dolls and the figure was playing with were sitting in the middle of the room, away from the toy chest, which they were inside of that afternoon when she cleaned her room.
If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. If you'd like to, you can follow me at Twitter. The handle is @FuzzyPantaloons, and I'll see you all next time.